I've got expensive taste, what can I say? I'm not gonna undo this and start over. Should we talk about the first now? Hi and welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Mathilde, I'm a French knitter, and if you're not new here, thank you so much for joining again. I really appreciate it. I think this is gonna be a pretty small podcast episode, which I mentioned last time, even though it's technically been, I think, 3 weeks since I last filmed a podcast, but I don't have that much to update you on because I've been mostly focusing on what I'm wearing now. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about my one finished object and a couple of whips, future plans, because that's one thing I want to have you guys' opinion on, if you have any opinions to give me. And at the end, I'm going to answer a few questions that you guys have asked me either on Instagram or on my YouTube post where I asked you for some questions. I think that's it. As you can probably tell, I'm pretty buzzed. I'm not sure why. Let's just get cracking. I am wearing one finished object, which I don't think you guys have seen as a whip. Last podcast I had shown you the yarn, I think, for it. This is a test knit I did for Joanne of testknits. This is the Amara Vest, which is a sleepover, as you can probably tell, with a V-neck. Again, you can probably tell, and a pretty high split hem, which is knitted in reverse half fisherman's rib. So before we get into the construction of it, let's talk about the yarn. The yarn was sponsored by Jensen. What am I saying? The yarn was sponsored by Isager for the test knit, so I got the Jensen yarn in the colorway 44S or 54S. I think it's 44S. I probably have the label, I'll show you right after, which is this really beautiful electric blue. It is 44S, and this is a 100% pure new wool yarn. I used about 250 grams, I think. I'll put it on the screen if that's not right, but I think that's right. I do have some leftover, so I've got this, and I've got 200 grams more. So I've basically got about 200, I wouldn't say 230 grams left over of Jensen. Not sure what I'll do with it yet. We'll talk about that afterwards. And it was paired with Silk Mohair by Isager in the colorway 54. And this is a regular Silk Mohair, absolutely lovely. One of my favorites. The color is, as you can probably tell, a little bit darker than the Jensen. It's more of a navy blue, but it's not quite a navy blue like. This is another mohair that I got that isn't by Isager, and this is darker, a more darker navy blue. So just see if you needed a comparison. I think they have a navy blue in the colorway 100. I think it's their navy blue, so it's not quite navy, but I think it paired really well with this, even though this is a little bit more colorful or like electric, I suppose. As you can probably tell, it did give me a bit of a mold effect, which is really pretty. The camera is going to blow out a little bit, and I apologize for that. They did send me the wrong color of mohair previously, which was a much lighter mohair, a blue one, but just a lighter blue. I'm really glad that they agreed to send me the correct color that I wanted, because I think it paired really well together. This is a combination of yarn that I've used before in my jacket number 2, and I really love it. So the yarn was absolutely lovely. The pattern is lovely as well. It's amazing. So the way you start is and I'm gonna probably forget a few things because it's been 3 weeks since I started, and my memory is not what it was. No, it was always pretty bad, but I've got a really bad memory. Anyways, I'm gonna talk too much in this video, I can already tell. So you start with the back panel. I think you start off with the correct number of stitches, and then you do some German short rows, shaping, and then you knit the back panel. Once you've finished with the back panel, you do some, at the bottom of the back panel, you do some armhole increases, and then you pick up for one front shoulder, you knit down until the end of the v-neck, I want to say. So you do some increases for the v-neck. I think maybe there were also some German short row at the top of the shoulders. I'm not sure, I don't remember. You do the same thing for the other panel, and then once you've joined, or once you've reached the bottom of the panels, you join them together at the bottom of the v-neck, and then you knit until you reach the same point as the back, sort of, with the armhole increases, and then you join in the round. And then what happens here is a little bit unusual compared to, you know, regular stockinette sleepovers, because once you join in the round, you knit one purl row, and then you knit you knit reverse half fisherman's rib. You knit it in the round for some amount of centimeters, and then you split for the hem, which is a very high split hem. As you can probably tell, this is the top of my high-waisted jeans, and so the split hem is really low under the armhole, or really near, I should say. What I also really love about this is that the split hem are finished with double knitting on the side, which you knit at the same time as the reverse half fisherman's rib. And then at the bottom you have a bit of ribbing, which I'm not sure you're going to be able to tell. Yeah, you can tell a little bit, to finish it off. And then I did a tubular bind off, which is what I always do. You can probably tell this isn't blocked because the ribbing at the bottom is cinching in a little bit. I finished this just 2 hours ago, so I've still got to block it. I'll do that afterwards, and I think it's going to relax a little bit, but I think otherwise, other than relaxing a bit, I don't think it's going to grow much, because my swatch didn't grow that much. What else can I tell you? I knitted the size small, which I think is the 3rd size in the pattern. This is a pattern that has at least 8 sizes, if not more. Can't remember. It's available now. It's been released at the beginning of the week, so I will add a link down below if you want to check it out. It's a really lovely pattern. I think it's meant to have 15 to 20 centimeter of positives, which is what I got, and yeah, I really love it. I'm excited also because it's not quite warm enough yet, so I can still wear it a little bit. I think it's going to be a great layering piece. I haven't really figured out yet how I'm going to style it exactly. I think with a pair of jeans it's just classic. It's a great way to style it. I would love to try it out with a long flowy white skirt, but I do not have that in my wardrobe, so we'll see. Let's talk about the specs for this one. Since this is a finished object, I'm going to talk about the price I would have paid if I had bought the yarn and the pattern myself, as well as the number of days it took me to knit. So I cast this on the 13th of May, and today is the 29th, so this has been on the needles for 16 days. It's a really fast knit. I didn't mention, but I did size up in needle size. So I think you're supposed to use 4.5mm for the stockinette and 4mm for the reverse half fisherman's rib. I use 5.5 for the stockinette and the reverse half fisherman's rib because my tension was not different between those two different techniques. And then for the ribbing I used 4mm? No, I used 4.5. No, I think I used 4mm, which looks really neat. I didn't mention the armholes are finished with just 1x1 ribbing, and the neckline as well. This was only my 2nd time doing a neckline. We'll talk about the first. Should we talk about the first now? Yeah, let's talk about the first one now, even though it's the next whip. You guys are gonna have a bit of a sneak peek at this. I did the neckline on my Tulip v-neck first, and I'm really glad I did because as you can probably tell, this one is a bit loose. I'll show you later on in the video how it looks on me, but I did this was my first time doing a v-neck, and I actually compared the instructions on the v-neck shaping on both patterns, so on the Tulip loop and on the Amara Vest, because since this was my first time doing a v-neck, I wanted to understand better how the central double decrease, I think that's what it's called, is done, and I wasn't quite like, this was clear, but I think just having another pattern that had written it out in a different way helped me make sure that I understood it correctly. And I think I did that. I think that was good that I did that, because it did allow me to have a better vision of what I was meant to do. So I did that first. And yeah, it's definitely too loose. I used the same needle size for the bind off as I did for the ribbing, and I think that's what happened. And so once I finished the tulip loop v-neck neckline, which we'll talk more about in detail later, I jumped on this one pretty quickly after that, I think 1 or 2 days after, and I decided to size down in needle size for the double knitting rows that you do before the sewn bind off, if you're doing a tubular bind off. So I think because I used 4mm for the ribbing, I used 3.5 for the 2 rows of double knitting, and then I just bound off, and I think it's really neat. And I prefer the look of that, obviously, over the other one. I think for the tulip loop, which you'll see, it looks a bit loose, but on me it doesn't look as bad, but we'll talk about that afterwards. Anyways, so that's the Amara Vest neckline. For the yarn, if I had purchased it myself, I would have paid, so I would have bought 5 skeins of Jensen, which would be 47.50 euros, and I'll put on the screen what that is in USD. And then I would have bought 3 skeins of silk mohair, which would have been 33 euros. So for the total price for the yarn would have been 80.50 euros, and the pattern price is 8.64 euros, and that would have made the total of this pattern 89.14 euros, which is pretty pricey for a sleepover. I think I wouldn't mind paying that, because that's a yarn combination that I really love. I love Jensen yarn, and I can definitely see myself using it again in the future for a full garment, like a sweater with long sleeves, but it's not something that I would buy several times a year, because it is pretty pricey, even though it's lovely. So I didn't mention, but I also have got 3 skeins left over of the mohair, just a little bit more, maybe like 3 skeins and a half. So if you have any suggestions for a pattern for that amount of yarn, so 230 grams of Jensen and 75 grams, maybe 100 grams of mohair, let me know. I think I have enough for a beanie, but I probably have too much for a beanie, so I would have leftover, and I think I have too little for another sleepover. So yeah, if you have any ideas, I'm keen to hear them. So let's talk about the tulip loop v-neck now, since we've already mentioned it. I am knitting the tulip loop v-neck, which is a pattern by Other Loops, and I'm knitting this in Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino and Soft Silk Mohair in the colorway Dusty Banana. I was gonna say Butter Yellow. No, that's just the trend, but it is Dusty Banana. And I also love this yarn combination, even though it is also pretty expensive. I've got expensive taste, what can I say? I've talked about this yarn before, so I'm not gonna get into that. Let's just talk straight about the pattern, since last time I have done the neckline. So I've mentioned the issues with this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish the whole sweater, I'm gonna block it, and I'm gonna see if blocking fixes the looseness of the neckline. If not, I will either undo the bind off and redo it, but that will be a bit of a pain. But if I have enough yarn left over, I'll probably cut the neckline and either reknit it entirely, or just, depending on what I can do, I can save, I'll redo the bind off that way. And if it's just a tiny bit too loose but okay, I will not redo it. Right now it does bother me, but as I said, when I wear it, I don't think it's too bad, too noticeable, so we'll see. This is a pretty oversized sweater, so it is gaping a little bit when I wear it. I think that's always going to be the case whether I redo the bind off or not. but I think I've got more positives than I'm meant to have. I don't know what's happening, guys. I'm really struggling with my gauge. I think my gauge is right, but I'm just choosing the wrong size in the pattern or the wrong size of needles. I don't know. So I think I've got more ease on this than I should have. I think it's meant to have between 20 to 30 centimeter of positive ease. I think I may be around 40. I haven't checked that, but it does look pretty huge, as you can probably see. And I'm using a needle size up, so I'm using 5mm instead of 4.5mm, so that is US 8 instead of US 7 maybe, because of my gauge issues. And on my swatch I was not reaching gauge, and so I sized up in the pattern. I'm knitting the size 3 instead of the size 2 I should probably be knitting. And I think once I'm knitting, even though I'm knitting flat for the majority of this garment, or like at least the beginning of it, I think when I actually knit a bigger panel, my gauge just, or my tension loosens up a tiny bit. And I think I would have gotten away with a size 2. Let me know what you think. I'm not gonna undo this and start over. I think I'm gonna go, with the flow, trust the process. It might end up being a pretty large garment. If it is, we'll see, maybe I'll reknit it again in a smaller size and give this one away, or I will keep it for myself and just wear it when it doesn't feel like it's swallowing me too much, depending on what I wear with it. We'll see. But yeah, I'm still gonna knit on this. This is where I was last time. So in addition to the neckline, I did about 8 centimeters on the body, I want to say, between 5 and 8. Which is pretty good, especially since I was pretty much knitting only on this. So I just took, one evening here, one evening there to knit on this because I really wanted to. So my question for you guys is, obviously I have another test knit that's gonna come, or that I should be starting today actually. Okay, let me talk maybe about that, and then we'll talk about the questions, or like I'll ask you guys the question. Okay, last podcast I also showed you some yarn that I received for another test knit for Joanne from Tox Knits. So I got the Onling number 21 in the colorway Army Green. This is a 60% cotton, 40% linen yarn. This is the label, and this test knit is sponsored by Onling, so I got the yarn, for the test knit. So I guess this is an ad as well. And I'm gonna knit the poppy blouse / dress. So it's an all-in-one pattern, or 2-in-1 pattern, I suppose. It's gonna be a long-sleeved blouse that you can, either just knit until the waist, basically, without any waist shaping, or you can knit as a dress with waist shaping. I haven't quite decided yet which one I'm gonna do, because I've still got a bit of time to decide that. Obviously it's a raglan dress with a really beautiful lace detail at the raglan, and so I've got the yoke to do basically before I decide. But then once I join in the round, I'll have to decide, because I will either have to start the waist decreases if I want to do the dress, or I will just knit straight. I think it doesn't have any waist shaping at all for the poppy, for the blouse version. So I haven't decided yet, but I've done my swatches. I've done 2 because, my tension is pretty bad. I started knitting this one with a 3.5mm needle, which I think that's right, instead of the 3mm in the pattern, because I usually need to, go up a size. But I was scared that it was going to be too see-through, and I also thought maybe my gauge was a bit too big for this, so I decided to make a full swatch on the 3mm needles. And you can probably tell there's not much difference, and in terms of size either. I think maybe there's 1 stitch more on the smaller one, So I need to recheck, but I think I might go with the 3mm needles anyways, because apparently I'm getting gauge. I don't know why. I think I'm getting gauge with this, so I'm gonna probably go with the 3mm needle. And this is a cotton linen combination of yarn. I have never tried that combination of yarn before. I haven't tried this yarn at all before. The knitting experience isn't too bad. It's definitely a little bit papery. You know what I mean? Like, it's not smooth, but it's not harsh. You know? It does soften up a little bit, but you can still see that it's got some structure, right? It doesn't have a lot of drape. This one does a little bit more, actually. So maybe depending on what fabric I want, I might... I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but that's going to be my priority for June. So because of that, I'm gonna be able to, I'm not gonna be able to knit a lot otherwise on other projects. So I want you guys to tune in and vote on whether I should focus next to that one on another project which I've not shown you in this episode because I've basically knit like 2 rows on it, which is a summer project. Either I will focus on the mixed strip Cami by Florence Miller, which I still haven't even joined in the round, or I will be focusing on the Tulip V-neck. Or another contender, I don't have it with me right now, but another contender is the Knit cardigan by Petite Knit. Now, I don't think that one is going to be my choice, just because I really want to work on this actually. I'm missing it a lot. But because the needle size is quite similar to the one for this, the Poppy Blouse test knit, and because it's brioche, I think it hurts my wrist a little bit, and I'm not sure how much this will hurt my wrist, so maybe it's better if I have another project that is not hurting my wrist on the needles. Anyways, I think it would make sense to focus on this, and I mean, this is a whip that I have had hibernating for a year, so because of that, it makes sense to knit on this. And then it's also summer, so obviously it's one of my only summer tops, so you know. But if I choose to knit the Poppy Blouse in a 3mm needle, that's the needle size I'm using for this. And I only have one needle, I think, or one pair of needle in that size. So, but also I really do want to work on the Tulip loop V-neck, but obviously it's a sweater, so I'm not actually gonna probably get a ton of wear out of it this summer. But also it's yellow, so it is summer. So I don't know, I need you guys' help because I cannot make up my mind. So please help me out. If you were just here for the knitting, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next podcast or the next video. But if you are keen to listen to me answer some questions, then I'm gonna do that. Thank you guys so much for your questions. I really appreciate them. The first one I got: how and when did you learn to knit? Also, your English is very good. Have you lived in England at all, Noelia? So thank you so much, Noelia, for your question. I talked a little bit before about how I got into knitting, but I'll get into it again. I learned to knit when I was around 12-13 years old, when I was in a like after class activity where I was going once a week, and every month we had one activity, one craft to learn. So one month it was mosaic, you know, learning how to do art using mosaic tiles. Another month was pottery, and then another month was knitting, for example. And so I learned how to knit pretty basic stitches like knits and purls probably, and I knit a whole scarf. Obviously this was my very first knitting project, which was pretty terrible. I don't even know where that scarf is, no idea. But I did really enjoy the craft at the time, but it didn't really grow something in me. And then several years later, so about 3-4 years now, one of my sisters had a kid, and I was thinking about what I could make for the kid as a gift, as a, you know, birth gift, I guess, birthday gift, like you know, he was just born and I wanted to gift something. And so I decided to knit a blanket. I don't know what came over me. I hadn't knit in ages, and I just grabbed random yarn, random needle size, didn't have a pattern. I just knit a big square. It's a pretty terrible square, but it is, I guess, what you could call a blanket. I don't even know if the yarn that I used was appropriate for kids. Then I had another niece born and I knitted another blanket randomly without a pattern or anything. And then I got into using patterns and learning about the yarns that you could use and the knitting needles and everything. So that's when I learned to knit. So just a couple of years ago, I guess, technically. And about my English, thank you so much. I don't think my English is that good, but thank you. I've actually lived in Scotland for about 9 months when I was 20, something like that. So several years ago. And I was an assistant teacher to a French teacher in a secondary school. I even did some classes in primary schools. It was really fun. Honestly, it's one of my best year. That's weird to say. It's an amazing memory. I was really lucky to be able to do that. It was also around that time that I really got into writing, so I wrote a lot in English, and so that really also helped me learn English. So yeah, thank you so much for your question. The next question is, what are your favorite tools you use for knitting? You sometimes say you are a relative beginner knitter, even though I think you are quite advanced. Do you have any ambitious projects in mind you're working towards? Love your channel, always looking forward to new episodes, whatever you decide to talk about knitting-wise. Thank you so much, that's really lovely. I think I'm going to keep the first question for a video that I might be making this summer, so about what tools I like to knit with, but I think for the other one, let's talk about it. So any ambitious projects I have. I think one thing I would really like to do is I would really like to try to hack a pattern or even just make my own pattern. And I don't mean that as in I want to design a pattern for other people to knit, because I don't think I have the skills for that. I mean, never saying never, that might happen one day, but definitely not now. I just really want to experiment with it for myself, like either doing a colorwork chart and knitting a colorwork, you know, hot water bottle cover or something, or maybe some socks, or even just a full-on garment. I think the first step is going to be for me to pick a pattern and just heavily modify it. I don't think I've ever really done that, but I think it's something I'm really, you know, it's been almost 3 years now since I've started to really truly knit every single day of my life, and so I love patterns, but I think I'm in that point where I'm really wanting to experiment. I think that would be really fun. So I think that's like one of the ambitious projects I have. I mean, you know, otherwise I've got some colorwork patterns that I would really want to make that I think for me are quite ambitious, but you know, I'll get around to them, but they're not like scaring me too much, I don't think. Yeah, so thank you so much for your question. I hope that answered it. And then another question was common misconceptions about living in Paris or Paris in general. Now, I've been thinking about this and I'm not sure what to answer. I don't know. I think, you know, Paris is quite a wide, like, has got quite a wide range of people in it, but at the same time, it's quite like there's, you know, thinking about Parisians are very mean and like very on the go, quick, which in a way is true. I think it just depends on where you go and which people you meet. What else could I say? Misconceptions. You know, Paris is a city of love. I think Paris isn't more of a romantic city than any other. I think one thing that I really love about Paris is the architecture. I think there are really some stunning buildings and some stunning landscapes that you can see. So I can understand why people would say that it's, you know, such a romantic city because of the architecture. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know. I've thought about it, but I can't really. It's a good question. Paris is lovely, but it's not my city. I'm more of a country girl. So I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining. Let me know what you think about which project should be my next focus, other than the test knit I have got to start doing. And I'll show you this pattern in the next podcast once it's blocked, just in case you guys want to have a little sneak peek of that. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!